40 years ago this weekend, Margrethe Alexandrine Thorhildur Ingrid of the House of Schleswig-Holstein-Sonderburg-Glücksburg succeeded to the Danish throne. The Danish monarchy is the oldest in Europe, stretching back more than 1,000 years. No surprise then that Danes are immensely proud of their royal family. Part of continental Europe, but culturally and historically Scandinavian, Denmark has a rich seafaring tradition, a capital city celebrated in song and in fairy tale, a country presenting a modern and successful face to the world. They certainly must be doing something right. Survey after survey shows Denmark to be the home to the happiest people in the world. And reigning over them and held in rare affection by them, their queen, Margrethe II. I went to meet the Queen at the Amalienborg Palace in Copenhagen. She spoke to me about her love for her father, about the pressures of life in the royal spotlight, her deep admiration for Britain's Queen Elizabeth, and her active involvement in the arts. She also showed us she knew a thing or two about television production.
Perhaps at one time you should do it over our shoulder so that you can see what I'm explaining.
Sylvan, do your job.
Sorry.
Well, thank you very much for meeting us, Your Majesty. 40 years on the throne, and you've seen so much history unfold. I mean, at this time, what goes through your mind?
Well, I'm still a bit surprised that 40 years have actually gone, because in many ways, looking back when my father died, it seems just the other day, and at other times it seems an age ago, because so much has happened.
How would you say Denmark has changed over that period?
In some ways, perhaps a lot, and in many ways I feel that it is very much the same country, though the details change. I may be a romantic. I don't know what. To me, it's still it's the country I was born in and which I've worked in and for all my life.
Margrethe was born in 1940, the eldest child of King Frederick IX and his wife Queen Ingrid. But Margrethe was not born to be queen. King Frederick had 3 daughters, but no sons, meaning the crown, on the king's death, would have passed to his brother. That was until the law was changed, when Margrethe was 13.
They began to talk to me about it in the winter before, in the 52, I think, when I was 12, but they didn't make a huge thing out of it. But the main point was that and I think that was what I felt all through my childhood, that my father was immensely pleased that his child would take the succession, and that my father was inordinately proud of his family, first of my mother and then his 3 daughters. He was a wonderful father, and I loved him very much, and he was always very proud of me, not always, I think, with a great reason, but that was the way he was.
And when did it turn from being a responsibility you knew you had to perform to something that you wanted?
Well, what it brought home to me was that I would lose my father one day. And that, I think, I remember as being the thing I really feared. And that was, I suppose, in a way, my one worry about it, that I should have to become queen before, for example, before I married, which it was not, thank God, wasn't the case. I was happily married and I had 2 children when my father died, and I felt that the home front was ready and there, and that I could do it. And my father had always somehow or other made me understand that he thought I could make it.
In 1967, Princess Margrethe married Henri de Laborde de Montpezat, a French diplomat, at the Naval Church in Copenhagen. Within just 2 years of their wedding, the family had grown to 4, with the arrival first of Prince Frederick, and then a second boy, Prince Joachim. But this period of Margrethe's life, when she could devote herself to her young family, was only ever going to be temporary. And on January the 14th, 1972, her father, King Frederick IX, passed away.
The tradition is that the new monarch goes out on the balcony and the then Prime Minister proclaims 3 times the King Frederick IX is dead, long live Queen Margrethe II. And then I made a very short speech in which I also gave my motto.
You were so close to your father, and it was the day after his death, and you're presented to the people of Denmark and the world as the next monarch. There's that excitement mixed with grief, which no one can really understand.
Part of the tradition, you don't let that sort of thing get you down, because that would be letting down my father's confidence in me. If I'd sort of buckled, I would really not have been doing what my father would hope, and nor my mother for that matter. I had such a feeling that you pull yourself together, and when it works, you feel that you're given. Well, there's a lot of adrenaline in the beginning, but of course, because it is exciting when you have to do something new and it really is important.
Ceremonial engagements of all shapes and sizes fill the Queen's diary. When we visited, there was a delegation of European lawmakers in town to discuss Denmark's presidency of the European Union. The Queen hosted a reception for them.
What about those days when you're perhaps not feeling confident, you don't want to go out and perform a state function, and you go out and you perform fantastically every time?
I don't know whether one does in that case perform fantastically, but the least one can do is one's best, at least, and make an effort, I mean. I think it's also important that you are not performing, but you're doing. This is not but you also have to, of course, to be conscious of the fact that when you walk through a door or when you walk down a staircase, you walk down the middle and you don't, sort of push along the wainscot.
That's a message the Queen has gently sought to pass along to the man who will succeed her, Crown Prince Frederick, and his Australian-born wife, Crown Princess Mary, as we'll see in a moment. – 2004 was a landmark year for Queen Margrethe of Denmark. It saw the wedding of her eldest son, Crown Prince Frederick, to Mary Donaldson, a marketing executive from Australia. Mary's journey from suburban girl next door to glamorous princess was the stuff of fairy tales, and seemed to catch the public imagination in much the same way that Kate Middleton was to do 7 years later, when she married the future King of England. But as the next generation has come to the fore, so the pressures of life in the royal spotlight have intensified, as Queen Margrethe told me.
Frederick, do you have fears for his future role?
Not really. He has really gained self-confidence during the last more than 10 years. He was unsure of himself when he was very young, but so are we all. But he developed slowly and surely, and then he met Crown Princess Mary, and they were married, and I think he feels very fulfilled. Both my sons are married to women that I'm extremely proud of calling my daughters-in-law. I think they're doing really well, because they've both come from outside. They were not born into the royal families. They weren't even actually. They were not born in Denmark, and they were actually not born in a well. Australia is part of the Commonwealth, and it has the Queen of Great Britain is Queen of Australia as well. But she wasn't born in a monarchical, so to speak, background. But she's picked up the way we live in Denmark in a wonderful way, and so has Princess Marie, who is married to Prince Joachim, my younger son.
You had that great support from your father, as you were telling me, in going into the role.
Yes.
And that training, really. How are you helping Princess Mary, who hasn't had that same background?
I really like her very much indeed, and she I hope, knows that and feels that. Because that's when you really like people, you can help them so much more easily. But she's been very, very competent in the way she's tackled her role. So it's been very, very easy to help along. And she comes and asks me, what should we do like that? What do you think about that? So I feel very confident in her. And I think we've got a very good relationship indeed, a warm relationship.
I was fortunate to be in Copenhagen when the Crown Prince and Princess of Denmark were with Prince William and Catherine visiting a UNICEF centre. And the amount of press, I was amongst them, and the amount of pressure on these four people is immense, and it was very clear there. They seem very comfortable with it and they cope very well with it, but this is not the world that you went into, is it?
No, there's a lot more focus on the younger members of the royal families today than there were when I was young. Press is more numerous and more there and more prepared to see whether they can find a place where they can poke their finger in. I think if people are happy in their own lives, then the possibility they will do well in their public eye as well is very important. And as far as I can see, Prince William and Princess Catherine are certainly well on the way in the same sort of course as Crown Prince Frederick and Crown Princess Mary.
Do you fear for the media pressure on them? Take Catherine, for example, Duchess of Cambridge, described as the biggest star in the world, and wherever she goes, there's huge pressure. How do you think she's coping?
Well, for one thing, I would never give marks to my colleagues, but she's doing it beautifully. And I know the pressure in Great Britain is quite a bit worse on the whole of the royal family than it is with us. But there is more pressure on the young people of today than there was when I was a child.
Free from the intense scrutiny under which Britain's royals live their lives, the Danish monarchy enjoys a considerable degree of informality, as this TV report on the Queen's 25th wedding anniversary shows.
On the morning of their silver wedding, they were woken up by friends and relatives, just like any ordinary couple in Denmark. It was the first time the Danes had the opportunity to see their queen in her nightgown, with her hair let down and no makeup.
But regardless of that impressive insouciance, Queen Margrethe remains clear that the line between public and private must be respected.
We are all perfectly prepared to be seen and to do our things more or less in public. But we do need to have a home base which is unassailed, where we can be in peace and where we can recuperate. I can well understand that people and the public and the press, or sometimes the press and the public, would like to know how we live every day. But if they saw how we lived every day, we wouldn't be living the sort of life, everyday life that people do live and what everybody needs to have, I think.
Is there an interest in keeping the mystique around the monarchy?
No, it's not the mystique. It's quite simply, you can't work if you aren't able to relax. And if you are being watched, even when you relax, you don't relax.
Away from the demands of being a queen, Margrethe has a vigorous other life of artistic and literary endeavour. She provided the illustrations for a Danish edition of The Lord of the Rings. Along with her husband, she translated into Danish a work by the French author Simone de Beauvoir. And her paintings are regularly exhibited in Denmark and abroad.
I started drawing as all children do, and I just didn't quite stop. But there was quite a long time from when I was about 17, 18 until I was nearly 30, where I didn't really believe that the talent I might have was really worth that much. But then I found that when I was about 30, I simply couldn't keep it. I just had to express myself in paintings and things like that. I got some supervision and some help to develop it. And as I did some more, I felt the need to show it, not to be patted on my back, but to get a sort of feeling of, well, it was worth anything at all. I've got enough confidence in what I do to say, everybody may not like it, but I think that it's got something, and some people do like it.
You need immense self-belief as an artist.
I suppose so. A certain
alone
amount of self-confidence, yes. A certain madness, I suppose, too.
Queen Margrethe has also done costume and set design for film and theatre productions, including this revival of a classic Danish ballet, A Folktale, in 1991.
De er jo så sigøjnere, ikke?
Ja.
Hvis man måske en, der bare havde tørklæde, og en havde øreringe.
Jeg tror nok, at vi skal have huen alle sammen, for ellers har I en rødt, og kun pigerne noget rødt. Ja. Man skal have den gennemgående røde farve i.
I'd always loved theatre, especially the ballet. And I'd been doing a little bit in a completely amateur way, I mean, for amateur performance with some friends, in the way that I did some scenography, and especially I drew costumes, and I made hats for a little ballet school. And then I was asked more than 20 years ago whether I would consider doing the scenery and the costumes for a ballet at the Royal Ballet here in Copenhagen, which I agreed to do, and that certainly was quite mad. But it was very, very exciting, and it was hard work, but it was great fun, and it was a very wonderful experience.
During a break in our conversation, I asked the Queen if she'd show me a piece of her work.
This is one of these things that I've done with what I call découpage, which is an expression of, say that it's a French word, but it's used in English too. It means that you cut out from paper and stick and glue it on, either on a flat board to make a sort of picture, or on something which is useful, like a sort of tray like this. And what I do is that I flick through catalogues from auction houses and art magazines, and I find attractive things, and I try to put them together to make an interesting surface with a bit of, well, imagination, I hope, and a bit of surprises.
Are people allowed to use these trays or these pieces of art?
They're pieces of imagination, and this tray usually sits in a guest room, so it can be used.
I'm imagining piles of magazines in a corner of a room somewhere in this palace, torn out bits of paper.
Piles of magazines in corners of several rooms, I'm afraid.
Not the staterooms, I'm sure.
Not exactly. No. I have my little corners where I do things like that.
When we come back, how attitudes to the monarchy have changed.
Nothing can be taken for granted.
March 2011 saw Denmark's Queen Margrethe in Helmand province in Afghanistan, visiting Danish soldiers stationed there.
They have been having a pretty tough time for now several years, and I feel very proud of the way they do their job. They are very responsible young people, and it was a wonderful experience.
4 months later, a very different terrain, a very different visit. High up towards the Arctic, Greenland is the world's largest island. It's also part of the Danish realm.
We spent a good fortnight in Greenland with the Royal Yacht and visited a lot of places. It was wonderful.
And very important for people there, I would have thought, to connect with their monarchies. They're connecting.
Yes, I think that really means something to the Greenlanders. We felt that very clearly this year. I think that they really felt that there was something. They were pleased to see us, and we were very pleased to come.
Also part of the Danish realm are the Faroes, an isolated group of islands situated between Scotland and Iceland. Margrethe and her husband, the Prince Consort, make a point of coming here too. For all the Queen's easy manner and approachability, these trips are a reminder of her constitutional role as Denmark's head of state. She has important responsibilities in the formation of new governments, but no role in lawmaking or the wielding of political power.
One of the great advantages of being brought up in the monarchy and as one's parent's child is that you are brought up to be outside politics, and so that you simply don't, that isn't just the day-to-day politics of your country is just something that you do not mix in and touch.
You can make an impartial decision.
I should be able to be completely impartial. I feel that's very important, and I hope that people realize that that is what I try to be, and that I feel that way, impartial.
It's very much the same role that's carried out by other European monarchies, not least by Queen Elizabeth of Great Britain and Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands.
We meet and we know each other quite well, all three of us. We don't meet at the same time very often, but we meet sort of here and there and occasionally. And we obviously find that we relate very easily to each other. I mean, you shouldn't forget, for all that there are three of us who are queens, but there are the men too. The reigning monarchs of Europe are all related to each other. We all know each other more or less well. And some of us are very closely related. The King of Sweden is my first cousin. The King of Norway is a sort of second cousin, but we've related backwards and forwards and in and out anyway. But we know each other very well. It's a great comfort.
As your generation of monarchy moves into greater and greater decades of reign, do you think there's been a shift in the way people think of monarchy over the time that you've reigned?
I suppose we're not taken for granted the way one was in those days, or the monarchy was taken more or less for granted, unless you were dead against it, of course. You have to be conscious of the fact that nothing can be taken for granted like that today either. And in fact, you never could have taken, you never should take that sort of thing for granted.
Your position?
Basically, you don't work to keep a position, you work to keep your country, to be something, well, you give your life to your country when you become the head of a country. I remember quite well listening to then Princess Elizabeth's speech, which she made, which was broadcast around her birthday when she was 21. That was in 1947. And I remember, I seem to remember having listened to that speech, the way she dedicated her life to the country. And that was an example which I very much felt that when I grew older, that was what it was about.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong. But I shall not have strength to carry out this resolution alone unless you join in it with me, as I now invite you to do.
Do you sometimes think you've sacrificed a lot, or you have sacrificed a lot? Do you feel like you've sacrificed?
I don't think you should think of it that way. I don't. It's part of me, and I only know that if it's for some reason or other, when I was young, I had not or had refused to take on the responsibility, I would have been running away. But it didn't get to that point with me ever. But it would have been well, it would have been really wrong.